Hi there everyone, and welcome back to the table once again, and we are doing a review video today on Compounded, a game designed by Daryl Lauder and published by Dice Hate Me Games. In this game, for 2 to 5 players, you play as scientists trying to reach the magic number of 50 atomic points. And this is done over the course of an hour by combining elements together to create compounds, to score them, and then gain your points and special bonuses to increase the potency and effectiveness of your lab. In these review videos, I like to talk about the complexity, the replayability, and then assess a game's overall value. So let's dive in. As I mentioned, Compounded is a 2 to 5 player game where you are trying to combine elements to create compounds, to score them, to not only get atomic points, but to also bolster and improve the efficiency of your lab. And as you can see, taking a look at the board here via Tabletop Simulator, what you can see is that every player gets a color, a corresponding colored board, some claim tokens for your elements down here when you're doing the study phase, a fire extinguisher, and in this case you get a general reference card, but this is specific to Tabletop Simulator. These do not appear as part of the original setup. You also get some fire tokens as well, the key to the lab, which indicates your first player token, and then your Bunsen burners and other lab tools that will be accumulated throughout the game and distributed among players who complete specific elements on the board. Setting up the board is very easy. You start with 9 of these basic elements laid out as such in a 4x4 grid, and then you add in some other more complex elements to create the initial lab setup that you're trying to complete. And then as you complete elements, you simply replace them from the board here, and randomly shuffled into this deck are also fire in the lab cards, which then can trigger combustible elements indicated by these fire symbols that will actually cause elements to explode, combust, and disperse any elements already placed on these boards to other adjacent elements. There's a lot going on here with a very, very simple setup. As long as everybody gets 4 elements and then abides by how many elements they are allowed to choose during their discovery phase, then really the gameplay itself doesn't really take that much to get into. You simply draw your elements, you then claim an element that you want to try to complete, you place those elements that you're allowed to complete based on your research, and then you can try to increase the amount of elements that you can hold after you complete an element. You can also then try to hold on to your wild element for bonus points or complete your fire extinguisher for points later on as well. And for me, trying to get to 50 points just by color matching is very, very easy to do. This game plays roughly about an hour, depending on how many people you're playing with, and with the variant 2-player mode, using an extra character, Nobel, you have a lot of different styles of play going on here, and you have a lot of different ways that you can achieve victory. Specifically with Nobel, you won't see him on the board here. He's an extra player that is utilized in the 2-player game and basically acts as a placeholder. He can never complete any elements, he can only ever hold 4 elements, but players can use him to draw and trade elements from in order to help improve their chances of completing some more complex compounds on the board down here. Now, if you did want to give yourself a little bit of an extra challenge, there are complex compounds available that involve far more elements, are worth more points, but some can be very volatile. As you notice, this one here is will fully disintegrate after 2 combustions. So these, I believe, are part of the Chemical Chaos expansion. I haven't actually played any of the expansions of this game yet, but there are 2 of them that are featured on this version of Tabletop Simulator's Compounded that I can do future videos on, should you guys let me know in the comments about that. But really, as long as players get the elements, the fire, the first player token, and choose a color and get all their corresponding tokens, as well as a fire extinguisher and a wild element, that's it. You guys are good to go. For me, this game has a lot of replayability. As I was mentioning with the introduction of Nobel for a 2-player game, that provides you a different sort of variance, but more importantly, it's this random element bag here. you never really know what you're going to get. Even though there are a finite number of each different type of element, what you don't get is the actual opportunity to choose what you're drawing, unless you're trading in elements from the bag to pick whatever you want from here. So if you have 3 of one kind of element, let's say, on your board, you can always trade that in for one element of your choice here, minus sulfur, because there's only 5 of them in the bag. But you can trade them for any type of thing that you want. Now, the game itself is listed as 13 plus, and that, I think, is simply just because you are dealing with legitimate, real-life compounds. Stuff that probably younger kids, less than 12 years old, or probably even younger than that, probably won't have a full appreciation of. But by the time you hit your 13, 14, late elementary school, early high school, kids are being exposed to these kind of elements. And because this is a legitimate-looking periodic table of elements as far as the atomic name and location on the board itself goes, there's a lot of learning that can be done here. This is a great learning tool for kids who want to understand how chemistry works at a very, very simple level. But because all the elements down here abide by the actual configuration, and as you can see down here, I never noticed this before, but you can actually see the valence electrons in the shells that surround the elements. So, which is a fantastic little note. I never noticed that before, but thank you, Tabletop Simulator, for letting me zoom in a lot more. So you can actually see your positive and negatively charged ions. You can actually see your valence electron spheres. This game just keeps getting deeper and deeper. It really is better gaming through chemistry. But for me, a game like this is something that I can always come back to because, first off, the setup is really quick and easy. Just choose your color and basically set up the board as such, and off you go. But also, at its core, it is strictly a color matching game. This is 2 white and 1 red. So all I need to do is just put 2 white cubes and 1 red cube, and I get this element, I get these points, and then I get to improve my discovery or my lab should I complete this element. Because you can use your claim token, this makes it a lot more difficult for other players to steal these compounds from you, which I think is pretty critical if there's something in particular you're trying to go for. The study phase allows you to claim those elements that you know that you really want to try to complete before other players steal them from you, and I think that that's fantastic. Board games can be great, but if the cost is too high, it can detract a lot of people from wanting to invest in that product, and that's a real shame because there are so many games out there that have such potential, but the price point might just be a little bit higher than what newcomers are wanting to pay. Fortunately for you guys, Compounded comes in at a fantastic price point. The base game itself is roughly around $30 to $35 depending on the price set by your local retailers. And that's just the base game. There are 2 expansions for this game as well, Chemical Chaos and the Geiger expansion, which again I have not featured, but I will if you guys let me know in the comments. So what you can do is you can take a $30 game, and then by investing maybe another $20, $25, what you now have is a base game with 2 expansions that you can play either together or on their own, and that still comes in at a lower price point than some of your other big title games out there. There's a lot of these big model-heavy games that are retailing around the $120 mark, and that's a pretty sizable investment for first-time gamers. But for people who are wanting to get a nice introduction to strategy games without breaking the bank, Compounded is a great place to start. Now, it seems kind of a little unfair that I'm reviewing and gushing about all these board games that I like. Not every board game holds true, and there are some that can be rather challenging, especially for new players. Fortunately, Compounded is not one of them. It is very easy to get into, it is not very expensive, and with the element randomness by the bag here, you're not really going to get entirely the same game twice, and the strategy of what you choose to level up on your beakers here they can vary from game to game depending on how you want to try to rush to the end. Do you want to just trigger the end of the game by researching these 3 elements as quick as possible? Or do you want to try to get the biggest value compounds to push it up to 50 as fast as you can? There are different types of ways to play. There are different types of ways to win to trigger the end game. And what's even handier is there's a little reminder phase order at the top of every compounded card. But for me, paying $55 for a game with 2 expansions, that's not that bad of a deal. That's not that bad of a deal at all. So I highly recommend that you guys check this out. Thank you very much for watching. Of course, subscribe, like, and share my videos as often as you can. Let me know in the comments section below if you have any questions, and I will see you all at the table next time. Bye!